Well, welcome everyone. I think people are still starting to come into the webinar, but I want to welcome everyone to the International Town Gown Association's Courageous Conversations, which is a webinar series that the ITGA puts on. And today's panel discussion is titled, "Now Hear My Point of View, College Students' Experiences During the Coronavirus." I'm Steve Patterson. I will be moderating today's webinar, and I'm also on the ITGA Executive Board. And I will be leading some very, very impressive student leaders, 5 of them to be exact, that are part of today's conversation. I should also remind people that this is being recorded. The entire webinar will be recorded. University and college students across the United States and beyond did not have the spring semester that they anticipated or expected, and the fall semester is not shaping up to be any different at this point. While most college campuses spent the summer planning for some semblance of face-to-face instruction, the increases in positive cases in college communities has resulted in institutions reverting back to fully online instruction. Unfortunately, most of what has been heard has been around financial and operational impacts on the institutions of higher ed, but rarely do we get to hear from the students themselves. From the loss of athletics rather, to the loss of study abroad opportunities, extracurricular activities, there is no doubt the coronavirus pandemic has changed the way students live and learn. This 2-part courageous conversation will highlight the voices of students. It will begin with a conversation about the students' experiences from March up through the present. And then we will have part 2 take place, to where this panel will come back again on November 11th at noon, same time, and talk about what their experience has been for over the course of the next 2 months as they navigate through this challenging time. So today, like I said, we have 5 stellar student leaders coming from not only the US, but also coming from Canada, as well as coming from the United Kingdom. Our panelists today are Taylor Smith, University of Guelph, Ontario, Canada; Demarcus Joiner, SGA President at the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa; Archana Chaudhary, Manchester Metropolitan University in the UK; Mason Zastrow, Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa; and Maggie Nedoma, Ohio University, here in the wonderful city of Athens, Ohio. I'm going to start the conversation with several questions for our panelists, and I want to remind attendees, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat. And my co-host today and fellow ITGA board member, Corey Patterson, who is the director of the Office of Neighborhood Life, Government Relations, and Community Engagement at Georgetown University. He will be fielding them for the panelists so that they will, hopefully, as this runs smoothly, will be able to answer those questions as they come through. But before we get to any of that, I want to start things off by having our panelists first talk and introduce and talk a little bit more about the organizations they're involved in, their majors, what year they are. So let's start off with that. And I think we're going to start with Terry Smith.
All right, so I am a senior at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. I study criminal justice and public policy with a minor in family and child studies. And I am involved in a lot of different groups on campus, particularly in the student transition office, working with first-year students and guiding them and helping them ease the transition between high school and university. I also work with the LGBTQ+ community on campus and international students as well.
Very good.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Demarcus Joiner. I'm currently a senior at the University of Alabama, where I serve as the Student Government Association president.
Hello everyone, my name is Archana Chaudhary and I'm from India. I'm a second year master's student at Manchester Metropolitan University, Manchester, UK. I'm studying fine arts and currently working in realms of creative empowerment of body positivity and cross-culturalism. Along with my education, I'm also working at Manchester Student Homes, a jointly owned and managed department of the University of Manchester and Manchester Metropolitan University. Manchester Student Homes is a free university-run housing service for students where we provide information, advice, and guidance in the private rented sector, and also any support and guidance whilst they are living in off-campus areas. Thank you.
My name is Mason Zastrow. I'm a junior at Iowa State University. I'm studying political science, philosophy, and sociology. The main thing that I do is I'm a senator in student government, where I sit on finance committee. I've previously also sat on the campus climate committee, and I also sit on the faculty senate committee for curriculum. I'm really excited to be part of this panel.
Hi, I'm Maggie Nedoma. I am a senior here at Ohio University. I am a student athlete on the volleyball team, and I'm also a member of COSA and SAC, which are student athlete representative programs. And I am also the social media coordinator for Bobcats Lead Change, which is a social justice group of student athletes here on campus.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being on the panel. You're all very impressive in your own right. So let's just jump right in. The first question I want to throw out, and Taylor, again, we'll start with you. How do you feel that the university and or the city in which your university resides has communicated expectations for returning this fall under a major pandemic?
I think the university has done an okay job communicating with students. You know, it's kind of unprecedented times for all of us, so we've definitely had to be flexible and willing to adapt to kind of what's thrown at us. I feel like it's definitely been harder for first year students to get information about their courses, especially because at my university, most courses are offered through an online format, which is definitely something that they've never had to navigate before.
So I guess I'll go second. I would say that I believe the University of Alabama has done an amazing job, because to get back to campus, every student had to be tested. So we tested over 30,000 students to return to campus. And also you had to complete a COVID-19 education training. So every student was trained about what campus will look like when we came back. Also, the university sends out emails and social media updates every day about how to wear masks, where to wear masks, just making sure students understand the importance of following the rules and making sure that we can stay safe and stay on campus as long as possible. So I do believe that the university has done its part in communicating with students to make sure that we have an amazing experience, but safe experience.
Nice.
I would agree with Demarcus. I guess the university has done a good job here. They've made masks compulsory everywhere within the university premises, and anyone who comes out from a different country has to isolate for 14 days before entering the university. So I guess they've taken all of the necessary precautions so far. So I guess they're doing pretty good right now.
For me, I think Iowa State did a really good job coming on to when students were coming back to campus. The one big difficulty that I think we had is that we've constantly continued to change policies. Originally, there was no, the students weren't sent through the student conduct process for violating COVID expectations, but that's since changed. And so now, in theory, you could get suspended for meeting in a group even off campus, and that changed 2 weeks into the semester. I think the city's done a really good job as well, and they've been a lot more consistent, but they've really worked on reaching out to college students, which is something that's difficult for them since they don't really have a direct line of communication. But I think they've done everything that they can.
Great.
I think Ohio University, our President Nellis, has done a great job of reaching out to all the students. We originally prepared to have everyone back on campus, I'm pretty sure, for phase 2, which starts next week or in 2 weeks, and they ended up cutting it back to just 7,000 students for safety reasons. And I think the people of Athens and Mayor Patterson and all of the small local businesses in Athens have done a great job of, as soon as something starts to kind of get, the cases get a little bit higher, we know like when to take it back and like allow Athens to kind of recover with everything. So I think they've done a really good job here.
That was not a paid for advertisement, by the way, for the city of Athens. Maggie, I'm going to start with you on this next question. You know, do you feel that the university and or the city has taken the right precautions to bring students back this fall? And also kind of a two-parter, what steps or actions do you think are missing?
I think we've done a good job. Again, hearing that they cut back on the number of students coming back for phase 2 did take a lot of weight off our shoulders, especially with athletics, because the more cases there are, it's more likely that we would get shut down and have to go home as well. And that just takes more time out of like our practices. So I think they've done a really good job of managing what it's going to look like in Athens. I would say maybe just a little bit better with Court Street. Kind of sometimes you still see people walking outside without their masks on. And I get when you're not around people, but when you're walking past Starbucks or something and you don't have a mask on, maybe being better at like holding people accountable out there.
For Iowa State, I think that the university did everything that they possibly could have to set up the opportunity for success this semester. The way that they had signage about social distancing, the way that they have continued to put hand sanitizer and make sure that that's available for everybody, the communication whenever policy was changed. Despite that, with hindsight, I don't know if we should have gone ahead with having classes in person, and I hope the next semester they keep that in mind. I think that the city has done a good job. Our governor, Kim Reynolds of Iowa, does not allow cities to have mask mandates themselves, and she doesn't have a mask mandate for the entire state either. Our city council this past week actually defied that order and did a mask mandate, although there's no penalty for it. So I think that even doing everything that we can, the answer might be it's still not viable to have classes in person. And I do think that that's something that we need to consider going forward into the spring semester.
I feel the university has taken the necessary precautions. However, the city has not completely, like it's not compulsory to wear masks within the city. And though they have made the international students self-isolate for 14 days after traveling internationally, but nobody is keeping a check on us. I mean, if we go out, they don't know that we're going out. I mean, how they're going to keep a check on all of the international students coming in or going out. I don't know if there's a record or if, because nobody has checked on us, particularly me, nobody has checked on me if I'm still in quarantine, how am I doing? So I guess, and it is scary when you see students on the street without mask. I guess the city should make them wearing masks compulsory within the city.
And I would say for us, like Mason kind of hit on, nobody knew what was going to happen when we came back. So once we came back, everybody was trying to figure everything out. But I believe that the university and the city had a comprehensive plan. Like I said earlier, everybody had to get tested before they could come back to campus. We also have an app, the exposure notification app. So it tells you if you've been around somebody for longer than 15 minutes and they've tested positive for COVID. So you go get tested then. I'm happy to say that we haven't had anybody, I guess, exposed in the classroom. So we're doing pretty good on that front. As far as the city goes, the city's working very closely with us. With our trends of COVID cases, I know they shut down the bars about 3 weeks ago. So they understand the importance of having us on campus because we are kind of the fuel for the economy here as well. The governor, she's put in a mask mandate, so that made it a lot easier for us. to wear a mask and to enforce wearing masks. So I do believe that we have done everything that we can do. Kind of to hit the second part of your question, what I think we could have done better. I think maybe we could have thought through more social aspect events, just because I know students were lacking that when they came to campus. And that has something to do with the spikes that we've had. So maybe if we would have thought through ways to have successful socially distant social events, that would have helped with that.
For us, I think that the University of Guelph has done a really great job at taking all the precautions needed on campus. We are mostly on an online format, so we are limiting the amount of people who are coming onto campus in general, as well as having mask mandates while you're in public spaces, limiting the number of students that come to residence. So they are doing active steps to take, so first years and upper year students can safely learn. As well as the Guelph community, they're following a lot of social distancing practices as well, and working with local businesses to make sure that everyone stays safe. I agree with Demarcus. I think that more it's like the social consequence of people coming in and trying to feel connected on campus while still being safe and socially distancing. Guelph has put a lot of online communities on, especially for first years, just to kind of build that sense of community. So it's a great place to start.
I'm going to first unmute myself. Archana, I'm going to start with you. What questions are not being asked or dealt with in regards to the student experience? What conversations do you want to have with either the university administration or with city officials?
Well, I feel that international students they're feeling a bit abandoned and neglected at the moment. So I feel if the university or even the city, they could, because it's like, this is my second year here, so it might be a bit easy for me because I know the place, but people who are coming in for the first time here and then they have to quarantine alone here and they have no connections whatsoever, it might be even more difficult for them. So I feel that the university should make a little bit more effort to understand them and to give them the necessary support and to check on them continuously. I guess that is one of the main points the university should look into when it comes to international students.
Yeah, and I can jump in on kind of reflecting similar themes. I think that's something that universities haven't looked at quite enough, is what exactly is the student experience in quarantine when you're having online education, especially if you do have it. I did see a question in the chat about what the context is for where universities are, and so I'll touch on that with this too. At one point, Ames was #1 in the country on New York Times' tracker of both cases per capita in the past 2 weeks and also the places where cases are accelerating the fastest. So Ames had a really bad spike a couple weeks ago, and it's gone down a little since then. At one point, our positivity rate was almost 30%. It's still almost 15%. Which is not a good place to be at. And when you have positivity rates that high, that means that there are people who aren't getting tested who are positive, which means that you're continuing to have students who need to quarantine. And so when you're having such a high percentage of students test positive or be near somebody who tests positive, the mental health of people who are in quarantine is a serious issue. This past Sunday, I completed a 20-day quarantine where I also believe that I had COVID, although I never got a positive test. And I'm somebody who's not had serious mental health issues, but it was difficult for me to complete my work, even when I was feeling okay because of the isolation. And I think the perspective coming from students who have been alone and from themselves for the past couple of weeks is something that universities really need to be considering more.
I'd like to touch on what Mason's saying as well. At least from my work with first year students on campus that I've noticed, there are a lot of factors outside of just learning in the online communities that have been adding additional stress to students. And I think that it's something that's not necessarily talked about as often as it should be. Mason has a great point. When you're in quarantine, like the learning environment's already at a heightened level of stress. Then when you take into account students living at home or students in their first year living with upper years, or extra financial stress that the pandemic has caused on students, those supports are ideal and they're needed.
I guess to kind of hop in now, I would say as a student leader, one conversation that I would like to have is how we are not necessarily incentivizing, but the universities are helping student leaders who essentially have to act as accountability partners for everybody on the university, just because we know we want to stay here and we know what is going on as far as administration and the city. So we are usually the liaisons between the city, the school administrators, and students. So trying to have a conversation between all of us to see what is needed for us, I think would be helpful. And kind of to answer the question that was in the chat, the University of Alabama has approximately 2,342 cases, but we have 38,000 students here. So that's kind of to put it in perspective for you all.
With that, Demarcus, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm curious as to whether the other panelists can speak to that a little bit, just so people have context as to what cases are looking like in the community or on campus. Okay.
I'm not really sure about the total amount of cases that we had. I know that Guelph did a pretty great job, and in the community in general, we didn't have many cases to begin with. I do know that we have had no new cases in the last 14 days.
I already mentioned a little bit about where Iowa State is. Just for some numbers, I think we're about 1,800 cases right now since August 1st. And our positivity rate total since then, I think, is about 14%. And that does include when we tested all students moving into the Department of Residence. In total, as of I think last Monday, 2% of all students, faculty, and staff had tested positive since August 1st, which I do think is a really monumental number.
Mm-hmm. And I could speak briefly to the city of Athens. We've had 540 total cases. That's counting recovered as well as active cases, and we're currently looking at a little more than 90 active cases, and that's countywide. I should qualify that as the case. I don't know, Maggie, did you want to jump in on anything that you've noticed?
I was just going to say the same thing. We get a lot of our numbers for the count from the whole county. So I know they just set up like online to see with when phase 2 happens, the student number versus the county number. But yeah, for the most part, our county has been like relatively low, I think. Well, it's high now, but again, it's a really small part of Ohio.
I'm not sure about the total number of cases at our university, but we've been in a lockdown since March, and the universities haven't opened yet. They're due to open on 21st. So there are not a lot of cases right now at the university.
Okay. Let me jump into the next question or another question. And Demarcus, maybe we can start with you. If you could meet one-on-one with the university president or with the mayor of your city, what one or two things would you share with them about your experience so far this year?
Yeah, so first I would say thank you, just because I know as the SGA president, it is a lot of stress leading all these people. So I would say thank you first off. But I will also let them know that, we have to make sure that everybody's at the table when making decisions. And I know, Mr. Patterson, as a mayor, you will never please anybody, well, everybody. So that is one thing that we have to keep in mind, but also making sure that everybody's needs are met, just because I, as a Student Government Association president, I didn't realize how shutting down a school would affect students financially, academically, even just going online. So I know that, we had to make this decision to shut down in March. And even me as an engineering major, it was tough finishing my last few engineering classes just because I'm more of a kinesthetic learner and I like going up to the teacher talking. So just thinking about those things and just being adaptable. And I think they've done a great job already, but just making sure everybody's at the table.
Just to jump on what Demarcus said as well, I think that a lot of the time students are ignored from the conversation, and you know, admin makes a lot of decisions regarding protocols and different policies that should be put in place. But hearing from the students themselves and being willing to adapt to their needs as the semester change and the state of the pandemic changes, I think is really important as well.
I would really agree with Taylor there. I guess it's really important to know what the students want, be it grading or how they want to come back, or how, if they're like, even if it's in quarantine or anything, how they want to be known, how they want to be heard. Because within these last few months, I've been stuck in a room just alone for like almost 3 months, and not even once did my university check on me. So I guess it would be nice if they could just once come out and take that effort to talk to us.
And Archana, you know, you being an artist, a graduate student in fine arts, that would imagine you've got unique challenges too with you doing and working in your own craft.
Yeah, because we don't have any studios, so we had to do our exhibitions online, which was really difficult. We just had like sheets we had to paint on or draw, mostly sketch, and that's how we had to present ourselves. So it wasn't just it wasn't just being alone, it was all the opportunities that we'd looked forward to, all of the network we'd looked forward to making, and like a future we'd imagined. It had all like literally come to just a single room, and it was even more heartbreaking when nobody even talked about it or even asked us even once, how are you feeling, or what do you want? Do you think we should go in a certain way?
Just to answer the original question about how it's, what I could say if I could talk to the mayor or the university president, I actually wrote an open letter to the University of Iowa State's administration. And so, I mean, I do have kind of a list of things that I would like to say. But for the most part, I just think that they really need to be taking seriously what it's like to be in isolation, what it might be going in and out of quarantine. And I mean, just from my experience over the summer, being around my parents who were able to work from home, and being around, being able to talk to people who did have jobs like a lot of professors might, or university administrators, and the ability to go to a job, to, you know, sit at a computer or even stay home and work, that really is a luxury that students don't have. If we do have classes in person and we're expected to go to them, or if the online component to a class that we don't want to go to isn't completely supplemental, then we have to be exposed to, 15 different people 3 times a day. If you're living in a dorm, think about how many people you are just casually exposed to. If you have to eat at a dining hall because you live in a dorm and you have to have a dining plan, that's more people that you're exposed to. And if there's one person who's positive and asymptomatic, and they're going around and they're spreading person to person, that's not a sustainable model. And I'm not sure if the university administration realizes that a positivity rate above 5% really means that there are going to be those positive cases who are spreading it to more people that you can't perfectly identify, you can't perfectly trace contacts.
Let me jump in real quick, Mason, because we kind of touched on this on Monday when we were all kind of getting to know each other and chatting briefly, because you raised an interesting issue that I, as a mayor and as a former academician at the university, really never thought about, and it's the potential for someone having to, enter into quarantine and then go through that quarantine period. And I'm opening up this to anyone to chime in on for sure. And then to come out of quarantine, which has got to be a struggle on campus to have to operate and learn under that environment, then to come out and then potentially be re-exposed again, you know, days later, a week later. So let's just briefly touch on that, because that was something, like I said, that I really had not thought of before. I'm sure other people had, but it came out of our conversation on Monday.
Sure, yeah, and I can talk about that just a little bit. It's not exactly the same as what I was talking about, but that's actually why I had a 20-day quarantine. It was originally supposed to be just 14 days, and then I started getting symptoms myself, so I had to isolate for another 10 after I started experiencing symptoms. And something that I think is really difficult is transitioning schedules. I think a lot of college kids really thrive when they're able to have a routine and to stick with it, thinking about, you know, I'll study in the library for 2 hours on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and being able to know, like, maybe even just simple stuff like where you're eating lunch, and to not have to think about the little stuff every single day. And to have that routine being thrown on and off. I mean, this morning I went to my first class in person in over 3 weeks. And even just being in a classroom environment, even though I've had, you know, online supplemental courses, it feels really different, and adjusting back to that environment is not easy to do.
I agree. Just to build a little bit off what Mason is saying, a lot of students do thrive on having a schedule, and you know, being thrown, your routine being thrown off and moving in and out of quarantine and just not being able to experience what you normally do on campus, it does wear on your emotional resiliency. And a lot of students are definitely experiencing that, and that isolation piece surrounding it. You know, they're stuck doing their courses in the same environment. Some are stuck at home, and you know, when campus is a safe space for a lot of students, that can be really difficult to even focus on getting out of bed in addition to doing your studies.
And kind of to piggyback off of all of that, and I know it's a few questions in the chat box about quarantine spaces and isolation spaces on campus. So to speak for the University of Alabama, we have approximately 500 quarantine spaces for students who test positive and need a place to stay. So once you test positive, we have an events team who basically walks with you the entire way through your quarantine. So they check on you every day. We have a COVID hotline that you can call at any time. We have a call center just for that. We also have students get fed 3 times a day. They have the option to pick their meals. So the experience has gotten better. I know when we first started, we didn't necessarily think through every aspect of quarantine spaces. And like Mason and Taylor said, I don't think we necessarily understood the emotional impact that quarantine has on people. And myself, I had to quarantine because I had COVID earlier in beginning of August, late July. So I had to quarantine, and I didn't really think about the emotional stress or strain that it put on me until after the fact. So I can say the University of Alabama has now thought about all of that, and they're doing better. So I'm eager to see what we do next.
I would like to put, like, I guess, a different perspective on quarantining. So when back in July is when kind of it went around our team right after that 4th of July weekend. And I personally quarantined in my apartment here in Athens. But for the most part, the Athens County Health Department, the Athens County Health Department sent us all home, unless you like physically couldn't go home. So like if I went home, there wasn't a safe place for me to be around my family. And during that, like, I guess the benefits of being on this team, being like on a team, was somebody was calling me every day. People would drop groceries off on my porch. Like, I never felt alone, even though I was physically alone. So it's harder for a lot of people that enjoy being social and enjoy doing all this stuff. But for me, I felt like quarantine allowed me to finally like stop worrying about everything else, and just the constant support of people throughout that time was really good personally.
At the University of Guelph, just to kind of go back to that chat question, We have been seeing like an increase of online support for students and the hours at which those are available. So that's a really good step in the right direction, as well as isolation spaces on campus. And we are given supplies to sanitize our areas if we do have to go to campus for whatever reason. So those are all steps in the right direction. And a lot of precautions are being taken in residences as well. So
This is all great conversation to be having. I've got a general question for all of you. Has COVID-19 pandemic changed your life goals as a student in any way? And if so, how?
I can go.
Uh-oh. You can go.
All right, thank you. Honestly, I'm just gonna get vulnerable here really quick. So I actually started seeing a therapist right after my quarantine, not really like anything that like really mental, but just to kind of like talk to people about other things. And yesterday I had a meeting with her again, and just like going over how you start COVID, you don't know what's going to go on. Your identity as a student athlete is stripped from you because you can't play, you can't practice, you can't see your teammates. And a lot of people, like, there's different ways you can go with it. A lot of people are like, what do I do now? Like, I'm a student athlete. There's nothing else. Like, what's next? And I personally, for the first time, athletics was not the priority for me. And to have that time to see what I wanted to do. And I changed my major right around that time too, and began taking classes towards stuff that I could actually apply to my future and doing public relations and doing social media. And I just found this different side of myself because the world was kind of on pause and I didn't have to focus so much on the other stuff. And back to the therapist part, like we were talking about, like, it was so good for me to have this time, like, away from everything. Like, I found different pieces of myself that I didn't know I had because I was always running to go do something else. So I think being able to slow down and even be in isolation to just kind of discover who I really was really empowering for me moving forward.
That's really powerful, Maggie. And I really appreciate you sharing with the group, because I've often wondered, and you and I've spoken before about this, and that is, the student athletes' experiences when they end up having to pivot, and responsibly so, depending on your conference, to rethink what fall sports would look like. So thank you for sharing that. That's important, I think, for everyone to be hearing.
So I guess for me, COVID didn't necessarily change my life goals, but kind of intensified my life goals. I knew I wanted to be a public servant and help people, but I didn't know how. I knew I wanted to go to law school, do all of that. But now being a student leader and seeing how leaders impact not only their cabinet and the people that they're supposed to impact, but the entire world. Like I said, Monday, I believe it was, I was like, I've been on television, on CNN, MSNBC, talked to like the Washington Post, and I never thought that would happen to me. But I feel that now I understand the importance of not only speaking for myself and for my constituents, but for everybody. So I do believe that COVID has helped me and has pushed me to further, I guess, educate myself on what I want to do in the future.
So Demarcus, before we continue on, and Taylor, we'll come back to you real quick. Were there things that you learned from that national media exposure that you'd not thought about before?
Yes, it was a lot. I've never been on national television before. So it was tough just because we don't necessarily, as students, think about going on CNN at 9 o'clock in the morning. But also it taught me that, everybody is human. So everybody wants to know what's going to make this situation better. So that's one thing that I learned from it all.
I totally agree with what Maggie is saying. I feel like a lot of the time as students, we are always looking towards the next thing and looking at getting our degree as a sort of an end goal, that we forget to slow down and sort of reevaluate where we are and what we want out of our university experiences. And COVID in particular for me had forced me to slow down and kind of reevaluate what is important in my life. And like Demarcus is saying, I always had a goal to be sort of this public servant in a role as well. But COVID has made me realize that I do excel in a mentorship role, and that those services that we've provided on campus is kind of more of the route that I wanted to go. So it definitely has changed my career path as well.
I think that I had a pretty similar experience to Demarcus when after I wrote the open letter to the university, I wrote a bill for Senate that's actually going to be seen tonight, recommending to the university that we should move all non-lab and non-studio classes online. And I got a lot of attention from that bill from my constituents, who I serve as a senator. And I've gotten feedback before, but never to the level that I have of this. And it's been mostly positive, but not entirely. And I think there's been a lot of fair criticism on my bill, and that's going to be amended tonight. I actually was on MSNBC too, Demarcus. It was the morning that I started feeling symptoms. So I was supposed to be on CNN in the afternoon, and I had to cancel because I had a fever of 102. But I was having your message elevated to a really higher level. And I mean, this is just another example of that, being able to speak in front of this group. But having a message elevated to a different level really makes you feel like you have responsibility for the people who your decisions are ultimately impacting. And I think that that's something that I've learned a lot in quarantine in this role. And I think that that's a really valuable lesson, and definitely not that, COVID's more good than bad or anything like that. But I do think that there are definitely lessons to be learned, and there are opportunities that have come out of it.
Without saying, this was a situation that I had never faced or fathomed, or anyone in that case. I'd only recently started exploring a new environment, and I had so many plans. The country was new to me, and I had only started making friends and going about drawing inspirations and adapting to a different environment. And then suddenly, not within within days, I found myself cornered inside a building, already away from my family and now away from the recently acquainted friends. But luckily, being an artist, I am sort of used to it, being alone and being in my own mind space, and just having that space where I could just paint and draw and do whatever I wanted to. Not for a very long time though, it gets you. But I guess I have started appreciating my company more. And I guess it has made me more mature in a way, that I've started taking care of myself. That obviously I call my mom like 10 times a day, but still I became like a bit more mature, and I've started realizing what my responsibilities are. And definitely my job at Manchester Student Homes kept me sane, or else I would have gone crazy. But yeah, I don't think my goals have changed. Moreover, I guess I've become more determined to send out what I feel and to send a message to the world, to bring a better change, and maybe to learn and make people learn a little bit as well.
Let me jump to the chat real quick. There was a question that has come up, and it was, how are you feeling about activities off campus? And it's kind of a two-parter. Do you feel like students are wearing masks and maintaining social distance guidelines? And how has this experience affected you and your friends' mental health, which you've already pretty much have touched on already? But let's stick with the first one. The first question is activities off campus.
I'd be happy to start on this one. Iowa State has a tradition every year. I'm not a particular fan of, but it's an Iowa State thing called 801 Day, which is where sororities and fraternities formally lift their drinking ban. And it was a disaster. We had, hundreds of people at these house parties at bars, which were shut down a couple weeks after 801 Day. I mean, I live in just a regular neighborhood, not even like a particular, like, it's not like I'm right next to the bars or a bunch of frat houses or anything. And I mean, there were dozens of people on streets and sidewalks, not wearing masks, not social distancing, drinking all day, going from party to party. And that was right before the enormous spike that Ames had. And frankly, I've been really disappointed with the behavior of students at my college. I think that even with the best intentions of the university, the way that our students have behaved in a reckless manner has really made it so that we can't succeed this semester being in person. And since then, with the almost threat that the university has put out saying that students could be suspended or even expelled for not following COVID guidelines, even off campus, I think that that was the best thing that they could have done, but it's disappointing that it ever had to come to that, and it might already be too late.
I would totally, I'm sorry, I would totally agree with Mason there. I guess students need to they need to realize that they are very much responsible for their own safety, because I see students at night partying and making noise and going about streets all night, and it's a bit scary and none of them, I've not seen a lot of students wear masks at all, and it is scary. I mean, I feel scared when like I cannot step out for a few more days, but I feel scared that when I do get to step out, what if I've already spent a few days in quarantine, and what if I catch it and then again have to be in quarantine? I mean, quarantine is a very scary thought right now. So I guess it's very important that students, they do realize that it is their responsibility and they need to actually get on with it.
Just on a little bit of a flip side perspective of that, I do feel like, I don't know if it's because most of our learning is online, so a lot of students have stayed home and are not actually located in the city that our university is in. But I feel like in our student community, there is a lot of accountability to other students, and that a lot of students are kind of keeping each other on track. The people that are going out and the people that are partying are a very small minority of our student population. And even those individuals, the older students, are kind of keeping them in check and keeping them accountable for those actions. So I'm really proud of the student community, at least the University of Guelph, and I think that they've all done a really great job.
And I know for us, when we first came back in August, most students had went home or were forced to go home in March, and they've been with their family members since March. So when they came back, they were missing that social aspect. So off-campus parties, of course, happened. People were going to the bars like crazy. And I think it wasn't until probably the first week of school when students began to understand that it's on all of us to make sure that we stay here for the entire semester. And I think the university has done a good job, not only putting it on students, but putting it on faculty and staff as well, to say, hey, we all have to hold each other accountable and making sure that we stay on campus. And I think to answer like the second part of the question, because I think he said it was more focused on like the drinking aspect of mental health. At the beginning, I believe students were drinking, not heavily, but just socially. But I think now, since classes have began and started, and this is like our test week, so more people are studying than they are going out and drinking and everything. So I don't think that has played a major role or had a major impact on students' mental health as far as here.
Also for Athens, I think it's extremely beneficial that the that the state of Ohio has made bars close at 10. I think that's helped a lot of students just not be out like together in bigger groups, because usually like as the night goes on, you get more drunk, you get less worried about what's going on around you, everything. So having the bars close at 10, I think, is very beneficial for us, and not having as many. And then off-campus parties, I know team-wise, like all the athletic sports, like you can hang out with your teams. We were in pods for the first 4 weeks of training. Yesterday was our first team practice of all 20 of us in the same gym, but it's still with the CDC guidelines. When we're hanging out outside of volleyball, we can't have more than 10 players in one space. So I think a lot of the athletes are doing a good job. I refuse to go down Court Street at certain times of day because I don't want to see it on the weekends. I don't even want to risk it. But I think for the most part, I haven't really seen big parties. I think people that live in apartments around me, like their roommates, whatever, but I've never really seen a full front yard or whatever that you see during fests and stuff.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I know that there's been a lot of questions that have come in on the chat, and I really appreciate that. This is one of those conversations that should have been 2 hours instead of 1, but there will be a second hour. That second hour will be on November 11th when this entire panel comes back to continue this conversation 2 months later. I do have a couple last questions that I want to pose to the panel to kind of leave on a little bit different note. And that first question, to start with briefly, even through COVID-19, what motivates you to keep pushing forward every single day?
Can I start? What motivates me is that my parents paid a lot of money and I need to go with it. But yeah, they've invested a lot in my future and I need to be really serious about it and actually make something out of it. And that it's not just on me, it is on the entire world that this has hit, and we all need to like understand each other and be more supportive of each other, and I guess be a little more patient. And I guess it's just that to have a better tomorrow and to have a better, like, I want my tomorrow to be better than today. No COVID days, that's what I guess it pushes me, that when there is no COVID, I just want to go ahead.
For me personally, I think that the pandemic has definitely changed the way that we connect to one another and connect to ourselves. So what motivates me is that opportunity to be in the classroom and learn about what I'm passionate about, as well as my work on campus. I am very committed to providing services and getting students connected to services. So now more than ever, I think that that's really, really vital. And I'm just happy I can be a part of that.
Kind of to piggyback off of what Taylor said, what motivates me is just the opportunity to advocate and represent students. Because if I stay in bed all day and the president calls me, who else is he going to call to hear the student perspective? So I do it not only for myself, but for the other students as well.
Yeah, similarly to everybody else, being in a leadership role, I think that right now it's really important for me to step up and to represent my constituents to try and make a change in the community. And similar to Archana, I mean, I'm trying to get into law school, and I mean, even though we're in a really interesting situation right now, this GPA, the semester still counts just like all the rest. So I just don't think that this would be a time for me to take a break on schoolwork, even though it would be a lot easier if I pushed it to the back burner.
Oh, I guess finally, for me, it's definitely my family. I'm pretty sure my grandma's watching this right now, so hey. Everything I do is to support my family, and I want to be great. Like, whatever happens, I graduate in 7-8 months. Like, whatever happens after this, I work every day for what they're doing, to do things for them. And then on campus, the Bobcat Lead Change group that I'm in, we meet for like 2 hours every Wednesday, and everybody's always like, this is the Zoom call that we look forward to. And just being with student athletes and faculty members, and Mayor Patterson's on there with us, like just having so many people working towards a common goal together, you can't, I guess, be sad in that moment. Like, everybody's just all motivated, working towards the same goal, and everybody picks up everybody else's energy. So it's amazing that we have this group to be a part of.
All of you have been absolutely amazing. I want you all to know that. I will say it was Maggie that invited me to Bobcats Lead Change, and it's Bobcats Lead Change that has taught me how to be an active ally, not a performative ally. So those are some of the things that I just find wonderful. You know, in the sake of time, I want to thank my panelists. You all are inspiring. You all are in your own right absolute leaders for your campuses. Your futures, just watching and listening to you is, I'm sure going to be, you're going to have astronomical trajectories to whatever you end up doing with the rest of your lives. So thank you, panelists. I want to thank our technical director, Douglas Stantz, who is the assistant to the borough manager of State College, Pennsylvania. I also want to thank again Corey Peterson for helping me co-host and making sure that we're getting as many of the questions up in the chat as possible. So Corey, as usual, thank you for all your help. And again, all of you who are attending today, you have an opportunity on November 11th at 12 o'clock Eastern time to join this panel again and to follow along on their journey and to hear this student voice that is vital, I believe, to the International Town Gown Association and anybody who is watching right now, as we're all trying to understand what the students' experiences are, our student leaders, what their experience is as they go through this really heavy, difficult, challenging time. But as you've observed today, they're all doing it with grace, intellect, and determination. So thank you, panelists, and thanks for all the attendees who are on today. And again, please join us on November 11th at 12 o'clock from 12 to 1. I will be moderating. This same panel will be there. And we'll keep this dialogue going, right, panel? Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later, Mayor Patterson.